What's up everybody, Chris Reed Beats here, back with another video. In this video, I want to introduce you guys to a Combinator patch that I have just created, and I'm going to be giving you guys a free download link for this Combinator that you can grab in the description. But before you do that, let's actually take a listen to the patch. All right, so let's actually jump into what this Combinator is and what it does. We're going to go ahead and open up the Combinator so I can show you guys what it is. So we're using the old school mixer. I just have an affinity for this mixer. I like the way that it looks and I like the way that it operates. It's very simple and straight to the point. We have this old school mixer here to add in two instruments. One instrument is a bass and the second is a Europa, which is acting as our keys or our synth poly that we're going to be using to play these chords. Now, both of these instruments have their own players attached to it. The bass has a polystep sequencer and it has a bass line generator, and both of them can operate independently of themselves. Also, the Europa has a polystep sequencer, scales and chords, and a dual arpeggio. Now, the reason why it has these three is because we want to be able to do some different things. So as we did in our demo, we were able to turn on and off our ARP, make it simple or complex, and that just helps us to just make some cool sounds and do some different stuff. So it runs as like a run sequencer that you can use, or you can turn the ARPs and you can actually turn the bass and keys and turn everything off, and then that way it will literally just be a Europa patch. But if we turn the keys on, then we get those chords. Now, what's cool about this patch is because we're using a Europa, I actually have this knob right in the middle, which will shape the sound of the Europa. And different Europa patches will take advantage of that knob differently. And you can actually change the Europa patch to any Europa patch that you want and get a different sound. And when you are changing this knob up here at the top, it's not just filter, it actually changes the shape of the different engines inside of the Europa. So that can give you some different complex sounds and really just be able to experiment with that. So that's really cool. And of course, if the Europa has any kind of effects, then you can turn that on or off right here. We have a simple vinyl dirt, which is being created with the Audiomatic Retro Transformer, the vinyl patch or the vinyl effect. And pretty much as you turn it up, you get more of that vinyl and more of that dirt. As you turn it down, you get less dirt. The simple and complex we already talked about, but more in depth as you turn your ARP on. If it's simple, then it's like this. When you click it for complex, it makes it a complex ARP. It just makes it faster and it moves the ARP from just going up to going up and down. Of course, you can leave that off and you can play your chords with your keyboard and you can get even more complex arpeggios happening that way. We also have a strum feature. Strum will turn those notes into a strum. So without it on and without these keys on, it's just a Europa patch playing one note. You can turn strum on. And if you turn your keys on, it will actually strum the chord. The last thing I want to talk about right here is the auto chord feature. So what auto chord does is when auto chord is off, then these notes and inversion as well as the open chords, all of this just kind of stays the same. It doesn't move, it doesn't change. But once you turn auto chord on, then these will begin to move automatically, and they move in a specific but also random pattern. So what's actually affecting these is the pulsar LFO1 and LFO2, and you can actually change the rate in which they change if you would like. That would be totally up to you. But what that means is when you play a key on your keyboard with scales and chords, you will get that note. But as you see, the notes are always changing and inversions are changing. So the next time I play it, I could get a different note. So now I have a different chord being played instead of the chord that was just played. So this auto chord feature just makes it so that as you're playing or as you have your chord progression laid out, it will change the chords, either giving it more notes or a different inversion. And that just kind of helps to give you some variety in your chords. So it automatically plays the chords for you. So we have a pattern as well. As I said, we have a pattern. We can turn on our bass and we can just press play to hear the pattern. So these patterns, some of these have been, created by me. I actually either played something out or I drew in a different pattern. But also what's happening with the polystep sequencer and the bassline generator, as you change the pattern, each of them changes. So when you're on pattern 4, you're also on pattern 4 for here. And these different patterns have been randomized for the bassline generator. Of course, you could just turn that off and then you could hear it without the bassline generator. Totally up to you how you use the patch. But of course, as I said, you can use it as a run device, which means you can just play the patterns that have been created for you, or you can turn those off and you can just play them with your keyboard as well and create something in your music production with that also. So last thing I want to show you guys is how you can do some editing and how you can create your own combinator. It actually looks a little complex, but once you really get down to it, it's actually very easy to start creating your own combinator. The first thing I want to do is actually open up the device and open up the editor. And the first button you will see is this configure button. And this is really cool because as you click on these different buttons, you can actually see what they are and you can start changing some stuff. So first of all, let's start with this knob here. If we come down to our settings, we can change the style and we can change the scale. So we can change what the scale, these notches behind it, what they will look like, if we need notches or not. Or we can leave them on. We have them either dark or light. And we can change the style of knob as well. So we have the classic combinator and we have all of these other different options that they have available. You can have this fader style. You can have this kind of fader, right? It has all these different kinds of different things that you can choose from. And when you find one that you like, so I liked this version. So when you find one that you like, it's actually really easy. You can actually just grab it and you can move it around pretty much anywhere. There's a slight grid that's available. So like you can't go any higher than this, but there's a slight grid that is available to how you can move this guy around. But what's cool is as you move it, you can see it actually snaps into place and you can either align it to the other knobs. So you see how that line in the middle, it lines there, or you can align it to other objects. So now these are lined and it's lined up with these different knobs. What's also cool is you can click and, oh, not that. You can also click, oh, nope, not that. You can also click and drag and highlight as many of them as you want. So if we start from here and we click and drag, we can actually click that and then we can hit space horizontally, and now they are spaced horizontally. So now they have the same amount of space apart. We could do the same for the bottom, space horizontally, and now they are the same amount of space apart. So you see how that lines up really easily. So that's like customizing how it looks. And there's a bunch of different things that you can change. You can have different styles for these buttons. The classic knob, the classic button, but they have all kinds of different buttons and things you can choose from. And that's really cool. Also, you over here, you can add different things. So we can add a run, which is something that we do need for this Combinator. So you can simply just add a run here. So now that we have this run, let's go ahead and add it somewhere, maybe over here. So we'll add that there, and then we'll highlight these, space horizontally, give them some space, you know. Also, you can move where your text is. So we can move this to the top. So we have strum on and off, auto chord, and run, just so we have a little bit more space with how these things match up. Let's move this one to the top too, just so we can have a different look. And this is, you know, the main controls. Either you have a control, which are these knobs, or you have a switch. So if you add in a switch, you can then change what that switch looks like. You can change the position of that switch, but what it does is every time you add a switch, that then goes into your editor. So this is for the configure mode. We can exit configure mode, and now in the editor mode, we can actually select the different devices that are within the Combinator, and then we can change the source and target of what we want that button or control to do. So we start with our filter, for example. So we select the filter device, and the source, we want the source. Which one of these controls do we want the source to change? So we want the source to change the mod wheel. So we select mod wheel from the drop down menu. So we have source, click, and we have all of these different options. Mod wheel is the one that we want to go with. So mod wheel will affect the filter. So as we go up and down, it changes the filter. We also could change this to like a sound shape, for example, if we wanted, and we would go to sound shape, and same thing there. So as we turn it up and down, the frequency is adjusted as so. One other thing to note is I changed the minimum and maximum values of this filter because I didn't want it to go like too low. So how we do that is with this min max button right here. So if it's all the way up, then however we change it, the knob will move very slightly because it doesn't have a big range to choose from. But if we open this guy up, then we can move the full amount of volume or of value from the frequency using the sound shape button. But we actually want this to be on our mod wheel. So we'll go back to mod wheel and we'll change this back to, I think it was around 64. So we'll keep that on the mod wheel. So that's there and it's set like that. So the same thing can be done for all of the different devices within the Combinator. So one other thing that we have a lot of stuff going on here. This is the Europa patch, chubby poly Europa. So right here, sound shape, that's this guy right here. Sound shape is affecting the engine 1 shape, engine 2 shape, engine 3 shape. It's affecting all of those engine shape amounts. I think this is supposed to be set to something different. Engine shape. I think this is one of these should be engine 3 filter. Yes, one of these should be engine 3 filter. So we have filter frequency, engine shape, and that is what sound shape does. It changes the shape of the Europa patch. But what's really cool, like I said before, you can actually change this Europa patch and then you can still adjust the sound shape that way. If you change the Europa patch, you still have access to change this sound shape. And that's a note that you can have for any instrument that you put inside of your Combinator. Depending on what kind of instrument it is, if you change from that instrument, then it's going to change what this value actually affects, because only Europas have Europa engines. You wouldn't get that option in the NNXT. So it might change that to something different or just not be applied to the NNXT. But another thing we have, so if we go to the Audiomatic 1, this is for our bass. So our bass has the Audiomatic and it has the bottom and the transform. And what we did there is we turned the presence and the dry wet and the transform is what affects this bass presence. So as you turn the presence up, it increases the transform and dry wet, and as you turn it down, it decreases the transform and dry wet. So but what it also does is inside of the mixer, as you turn it up, it turns some of the volume up, the treble and the bass, and as you turn it down, it does the same. So it turns the treble and bass down. So it really just kind of takes that bass in or out of the sound. So these are some different things that you can do when creating your own combinator or customizing combinators. You can always go into this edit window and you can change around some different things. I think the most adventurous thing I did with this patch was I flipped the rack around and I used the Pulsar LFO. I took the CV outs of LFO1 and LFO2 and I routed them to this combinator source CV in. So it's routed right here. And what that does is that gives me the ability to add a target for that. So if we have this Pulsar here, we have auto chord, which is this switch right here. We see it's locked onto auto chord. And what does it do? It wants the LFO1 level. So the LFO1 level changes as you turn on this LFO. But the part that really makes it special is when we come to scale and chord. Over here, we have CV1, CVN1 is affecting the open chord. CVN1 is affecting the inversion. CVN2, number of notes. So that's why with chord complexity, you have this automatic. When the auto chord is on, it automatically is generating the changes inside of these scales and chords automatically by the rate that is being set here with Pulsar. So the thing that auto chord does is when you turn auto chord on and off, it turns the level of the LFO on and off. So now nothing is happening. But when you turn the auto chord on, it shoots the level up to full. Now you can also change the rate so we can make this much faster if we want it. And now you will see these guys are just going crazy. So that's cool because as you change the rate that those chords are changing, it changes the amounts of notes and the inversion. And as you are playing your chord on your piano or on your MIDI keyboard, it's actually going to play a different chord each time you play it because of that auto chord feature. So that's one way that you can customize the patch as well. I think that's pretty much as I wanted to talk about. We talked about the creation of it. Oh, the last thing. So, if you want to actually create a backdrop for this thing, I just used Canva. And right here, if you open up this editor and you go to configure, it will tell you based on what kind of unit you are using, because you can actually make this bigger, right? So you can have a huge, and you have a bunch of units down here. You can have it medium, right? I chose the classic size. So with the classic size, it's not as much happening, but it changes the current backdrop image size. It tells you what's recommended. It gives you your resolution here. This is the resolution. So if you plug that resolution into Photoshop or Canva, then it will give you the size that you need for this backdrop. And then all you need to do is you can remove this backdrop. All you need to do is go to select backdrop and then find the backdrop that you have, and then you can just load it right in. Of course, you can pretty much put whatever you want there. If you have some other kind of backdrop, then you can put something else there. It's totally up to you. It's just whether or not it looks good or if it works with your setup. But pretty much changing the backdrop is pretty simple and easy. It just is about you customizing the look of it. It's just totally up to you how you customize the look of this combinator. So yeah, that is creating custom combinators in Reason 12. And also, like I said, I'll have this combinator available for you guys in the description below. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. You got something out of it. If you did, please leave a like on this video and comment down below if you guys are interested in other creations or tips and tricks inside of Reason. I would love to go over some different stuff with you guys. So appreciate you guys for watching. Until next time, peace.